I am Anna Auerbach. I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of Work. We're a startup championing flexibility as the future of work. We believe that flexibility is actually at the root cause of so many issues that companies face, so many operational challenges, as well as challenges people face in their lives. And we believe that flexibility has the power to transform people's lives and transform companies. I came to this issue from my own personal experience of having a child and managing this whole dual career household nonsense, and just observing the challenges of women in leadership. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that. My slides are backwards. Okay, well, so today we all know that only 5% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women. We've all read these stats. Only 18% of startups that are venture-backed have a female founder. And this is always the most shocking one. There are more CEOs named John than there are women altogether in the S&P 1500. You might think it's just because John is a popular name. There's actually more CEOs named David in the S&P 1500 than there are women altogether. But how can this be when women are 57% of the college-educated entry-level workforce, 57% of college graduates, 50% of science and engineering degrees, and 48% of medical degrees, 47% of law degrees? We're doing really well with our young girls. They're doing exceptionally well. So what's happening in the workforce? We believe that flexibility is the challenge, and it's a leaky pipeline. A lot of companies are actually hiring 50-50 men and women. Not all, but a lot are doing really well with that. But we're losing all those women at a certain point. So over 30% of the most talented women leave the workforce entirely after having a child. 70% of this group would have stayed in the workforce if they had access to flexibility. The latest stats I read actually show that 30% being closer to 40%. We actually believe that if you actually introduce flexibility strategically, you can completely change the number of Fortune 500 female CEOs. So big chart, let me orient you to it. This shows the percentage of women in the workforce from entry level to Fortune 500 CEOs. And we see a declining number, and that's because of the opt-out issue and the opt-down issue. So if we can actually retain those women, those 70% that say they would have stayed in the workforce if they had flexibility, that's the orange area. Those are women we're saving from opting out by giving them flexibility. There's a countless number, we're making an assumption here, that are opting down, women that are taking less career advancing jobs, less leadership track jobs so they can get flexibility. If we actually bring those women back to the workforce with flexibility, we actually get 100 new female CEOs in the Fortune 500. That's game changing. So if that's the case, like, why don't we understand what flexibility is? So I think there's no definition. If you look in the Oxford Dictionary, Merriam-Webster, there's no definition for flexibility. We actually created one, it's up here. You can read it yourself. But the bottom line of it is these are modifications to a full-time arrangement. They enhance the compatibility, and that's the key, between the needs of an employee and the objectives of an employer. It's a two-way street, it's a compact, and it's a way to create an alignment. We believe that today flexibility is a market failure, and here's why. There's a huge demand for flexibility. In fact, 96% of individuals need flexibility. This is not want. This is on a needs basis. And floating around the room are these blue and orange reports that we actually just put out. So this is based on that data. We did a huge study on flexibility in the US, actually doing needs basis, structuring the data. And so you have a huge amount of demand. That's not surprising. Everybody wants flexibility. Everybody needs flexibility. But interestingly, companies are actually have these policies. 80% of companies actually have some form of flexibility policy. So what's happening when only 19% of people say they have access to the flexible schedule they need? Well, what's happening is a vicious cycle, and it's caused by these three things. So first, there's no clear labeling system. We're using words like telework, telecommute, remote, flexible work hours, flexible FaceTime interchangeably. And so nobody knows what these things mean. Second, there's an issue of perception challenge and bias. So flexibility is seen as something soft and squishy, as something that moms need, as something somebody not serious needs. And so it's not taken seriously, it's not invested in. And because of that, there's little transparency in data. So I would bet for most of you, the way you find out about flexibility is you dig somewhere in an 80-page employee handbook that you haven't looked at since your first day at work, and somewhere buried in there is some information maybe potentially about flexibility policies. There's no company that's tracking data on utilization. There's no company that's tracking data on the impact of flexibility. And then the whole cycle starts again. So how do we solve this? We need to solve it by, first of all, understanding what flexibility has the power to do. It has the power to address the leadership gap, but it can do so much more. It can transform employee lives. And from our data, we find that there are three core challenges to flexibility and three core reasons people need flexibility: care, career, and wellness. And there's significant percentages that contribute to why it's so challenging. So for example, for care, 32% of employees say it's hard for them to manage their caregiving because of a lack of flexibility. Career, this is around productivity. As we've embraced these open workspaces, as we all work 9 to 6, it's hard to get work done. Not everybody works 9 to 6. We think a lot about creativity, how creatives work. Not everybody's brain works from 9 to 6. My brain doesn't just turn on at 9 and turn off at 6. I don't know about you all. So I think it's important to think about drivers of flexibility that are not just about caregiving, not just about moms. And the last bit is around wellness. So companies are spending so much money on healthcare, on keeping their employees having great benefits like gym memberships, acupuncture, but not decreasing the barriers to that. But this isn't just good for employees, it's good for companies. Companies that embrace structured workplace flexibility have a higher employee net promoter score. That's how likely are employees to say good things about you. Employees stay longer because employees without access to flexibility are twice as likely to be dissatisfied and to consider leaving their job. And really importantly, flexibility is the only way we see to beat the productivity curve. So this is labor output over the last, since 1948. And for the last decade, it's been at about 1.4%. And the reason for that is burnout. We can't wring the towel anymore. We're all burnt out. We're working at the max. Creativity is an all-time low. We can't produce anymore. If you give people flexibility, you give them back self-efficacy. You let them work the way they work best. You make them more productive. You make them more likely to stay longer. You can actually beat this productivity curve. So imagine a world where women are equally represented in leadership because they're not forced to make difficult decisions like opting out or opting down. Where caregiving is valued, where the fact that we have to raise children and this is the only way the world kind of continues as we keep having babies and we have more people and the world doesn't end, where that is equally valued. And caregiving is respected as not just caregiving for children, but caregiving for parents. We have 2 sandwich generations. Imagine a world where the workday is structured for wellness, where people can actually get to the gym, eat healthy, get enough sleep, actually stay healthy and decrease absenteeism. And imagine a world where work-life compatibility is a business priority, where this is put right alongside profitability, because this is the best way to increase productivity and profitability. That's it. I have a couple tips for you. I missed them by accident. So how do we fix this? So 3 quick tips, because I think we're running out of time. One is standardization. So adopt a universal language. We recommend ours. It's free for the taking. And language is below, and it's in those handouts that are floating around. So first of all, to stop the system of bias, to stop the inability to measure data, it's important to have a consistent and clear language and labeling system. So for example, people say remote, I'm remote today. You're not remote today. Remote is you're never in an office. You're in our world Desk Plus today, or you're working from home today. You're not remote today. So using standardization helps to sort of stop some of the challenges around perception bias and to stop some of the confusion. Second, transparency. So make information within your companies, within whatever world you're in, more broadly available. So flexibility shouldn't be tucked away in a handbook. It should be part of an onboarding process, part of an annual evaluation process, part of the way we all operate, part of, you kick off a new team setup and it's part of your team learning. It's something you talk about in the same way you talk about a Myers-Briggs or things like that at work. And finally, most importantly, is data. So in the little research thing that's floating around, there's a lot of data around flexibility. The best way, I believe, to combat bias is through data. It doesn't always stop all bias, but when you see the facts of flexibility, when you see how big the need is, how big the gap is, what this drives, that in fact that it drives all the most important business metrics, it is clear that flexibility is important. So those are 3 great ways to start to fix the problem. That's it. I have 1 minute for Q&A, I think. I don't know if there's a couple quick questions I can answer. I'd love to do that if I can. Yeah. Yeah, so opting down for us is the challenge of taking a job that is not a promotion track job because you think you're going to get more flexibility that way. So a typical example is I started my career at McKinsey is about half the women that went out on maternity leave came down to internally facing roles that were not partner track roles. So that's what we call sort of the opting down challenge, which is women making really difficult decisions about the type of job they want because they think they can access flexibility better by taking a non-sort of high caliber, non-leadership track role. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and the quick answer before I get the cane and get pulled off stage is data, right? If flexibility is seen as something soft and squishy, you can't change mindsets. It's seen as something that's sort of a special case and an exception. When companies see that their talent is going to stay longer, work harder, work better, produce more, they're going to have a faster time to hire. They're going to get better results. There's no question. I think flexibility has a lot of stigma attached to it. I honestly wish we could throw the word out the window, but we can't because everybody knows what flexibility is. But I think the more companies see data, the more they're likely to change their mind. I think there's a lot of institutional bias around if I can't see heads working, nobody's working. But I think the data is the best way to change that. And I think I'm going to get the cane, so I'm going to go. Thank you all for joining me.